Alright, so this is one of my friend's motherboards. I wanted to make the video on me fixing it while I was doing it, but I was too lazy so I didn't. But this was pretty cool, and not a lot of information out there that confirms it, so I wanted to add something to the mix, to add my fix to the mix, just so we can help anyone else who has this issue. So this is an AMD B350F gaming motherboard. It's got a Ryzen 5 1600 in it right now, just some cheap graphics card. And the issue that this motherboard had is it was a BIOS update. We've updated the BIOS on this motherboard a few times over the years, probably 3 or 4, but on the most recent one to the newest BIOS version, we ran into an issue. It got to 100% and it froze. We left it there for 30 minutes, somewhere around there, and it just froze at 100%. Nothing happened. Left it longer, and eventually we had to power it down, and it was what we assume a bad flash to the BIOS chip, and it bricked the motherboard. If any of you have used some of the newer Asus motherboards, you'll notice, see if we can get some light in there, those 4 LEDs, they're going left to right. They're kind of white. They're stacked on top of each other. Each one of those LEDs is a different part in the boot process that it's checking. I think there's a DRAM, CPU, VGA, and then one that just turns green when it's ready. What we were seeing, I've been reading that other people had similar issues. Mostly it stuck on the DRAM light, but ours didn't. So DRAM would turn on, I think that's the red one, maybe it's amber, and then it would go to CPU and it would hit VGA, the white light on this motherboard, and it would stick at VGA, the white light on. So it got stuck on VGA. We tried a million things. We have multiple video cards, multiple power supplies, new processor even, everything, and we couldn't get it going. I just got it fixed yesterday. And the way that I did that is by flashing the BIOS. It's a pretty common procedure, especially with older Asus motherboards, have a BIOS chip in a socket. You could just pop out. It would barely even be noteworthy. But what we have on this motherboard, that right there is the BIOS chip. And right next to it, you can see a pin header. The 9 pins right there. One of them's missing there in the corner on purpose. But that's the BIOS chip, so you can buy a replacement BIOS chip if you got good soldering skills. On eBay, people pre-program these and then send them in the mail. I've done that on a number of machines, but that header had me thinking that maybe we could just program this chip ourselves without having to take any hot metal to this motherboard. Less chance of an error as long as you are not putting too high of a voltage in there. This pin header right there, what I found was there is a post about it on the Asus ROG forum, and one guy who is allegedly, and I mean a lot of people corroborate this, works for Asus on the motherboard ROG team, confirmed that not only is that a pin header for programming the BIOS, but he gave us the pinouts and confirmed it's just a regular SPI flash serial connection. So he gave us the pinout, and he also confirmed that it is 1.8 volts only in circuit, and those pins are connected, in some fashion, are connected to a few pins on the CPU. So we have to be really careful with this. When I first messed with it, I took the CPU out, but I got tired of doing that, and I trusted my flasher after a few tests to stay at 1.8 volts, so I left the processor in, and it was working fine. But yeah, so that is the SPI pin headers for that BIOS chip on this motherboard, and now in retrospect, I can confirm for you that they work. We flashed this motherboard correctly, and I'm going to show you how I did that. So I wanted to go over the tools that I used to flash this. You actually don't need much. So this over here is some of the parts to a really cheap, like $14 flasher on Amazon. That should work, generally speaking. People have used these to fix motherboards in the past that do need their chips flashed. These are really common on like Amazon. I have not used these, and I still haven't. I bought this because I thought I was in a hurry, and I just wanted to get it here fast to fix the motherboard. At the same time, a few days before I ordered this, I had ordered this one. This is from embeddedcomputers.net. It's a FlashCat USB. This is a very nice SPI flasher. The reason I got this is because for one, it's just a well-known flashing utility. It's really highly regarded. And it has 3.3 and 1.8 volt capability. If you remember from the video, earlier in the video, we need to program these chips if they're in the motherboard, at least for these specific era of ROG motherboards. We need to program at 1.8 volts, and going higher than 1.8 volts can actually cause damage. So this one can go down to 1.8 volts also. You see I also got the 1.8 volt adapter to go with it. So that would, I'm actually not 100% sure exactly what all the pins are on these because I never had to use it, but you know, this would socket in there somehow, and then you'd close it, and then this is the adapter for a regular just SPI pin out, 9 pin or 10 or 8 pin, I guess. Yeah, so something like that, and then you'd hook up those pins, plug this into your computer, and then you could flash that way. I used this utility, or this board, because it's a lot nicer. This one is more like $60, $70, so is it worth it for one board? I don't know, but I did want to find a nicer flasher that I could continue using for other projects. And then the last thing I bought were just these jumper cables. I bought an assortment. The pin header on the motherboard is smaller than like your regular USB pin header. The pins are pretty small, so you might have like, you know, a few cables kind of like this laying around, or maybe ones you could salvage from old computer power buttons, but these are actually too big. So let me find one of the smaller ones. So these 2mm ones, you'll notice they're a lot smaller, and they actually come in sets of 2. So I'm not super familiar with, you know, all the pinouts and all the different pin. I forgot what the word is, but for however big it is and how far it's spaced, the 2mm. But these are the ones you'll need, and then out of this assortment of cables, I think all of these together were like $6 on Amazon. One end has these tiny pins to go into the motherboard, and the other end has kind of these regular size that fit on most, like, you know, USB pin header size pins. So with that, so I used this nice programmer, like I said, because I can force it to go to 1.8 volts. I mean, it's a really nice programmer. It comes with nice software. So I can only really confirm that this works with this, but you can look at the pinouts in its PDF, and then through a forum post that I'm actually going to link somewhere, you can find the pinouts for the motherboard, and then you just have to match those up. And I failed the writing quite a few times, so I got tired of putting these in one by one on the motherboard, so I took... That's just a bunch of those 2mm ones, and I put them together, and I just taped them. That's just yellow electrical tape to make a little makeshift pin header that will that's at least a lot easier to put in one go than having to do each one of these manually. So you'll notice these, I did do these side by side. Like these pins, I did them sideways so they jump from pin 1 to 2 and not like 1 to 3, for example. But really, you just need to get it hooked up and then plug it in, and then hopefully you should be, as long as you're running 1.8 volts, you should be able to identify the chip on there. That's another reason why I like this programmer. There's a lot of data out there for this to automatically detect what chip is on the other side, and it kind of does some things for you. I haven't done a crazy amount of SPI flashing, so that was helpful for me. So I had peace of mind of a nice piece of equipment. Alright, so the last thing I want to do is just show you that I can read the chip. I got it working. Like I said, it was working when I started making this video because I forgot to videotape anything while I was actually fixing it because I was too focused on that. So I'm just going to show you that we can read the chip on the motherboard, and then from there, if you can read it, you can write it, generally speaking. This is the FlashCat USB software. It says that nothing is connected because we have our little flasher and header right here, and then we have a USB cable that's plugged in to the computer. We'll plug this into the motherboard, and then we'll plug the flasher into the computer, and it should be able to read the chip. So the hardest part was probably just making sure all these pins were set up correctly. After messing with this for so long, I just kind of know that I set this up so that white and purple go in a specific direction. You'll notice there's 10 pins on here. There's only 9 on the other one. One of them is removed, and that is here at the bottom. So this white cable right there, if we follow it, it goes nowhere. I'm actually only using one section of the rest of this cable because I didn't have enough on one existing cable. Anyway, so getting the pinouts on there and then hooking them all up to the motherboard correctly is probably the hardest part. If you do one thing, make sure that VCC and ground are correct. After that, you probably don't really have much of a chance of hurting anything. But if you put VCC and ground on the wrong pins, there's a very good chance that something will break. So pay close attention to VCC and ground. But so there's this, and then I know that these ones should be at the bottom. So I'm going to come over to the machine. I'm going to turn on a flashlight to help with filming. It might just make things worse, but hopefully we can see better. And then there are the pins right there. They are. So I'm going to take this and then, wow. So right there. Push those onto the header. You probably couldn't see any of that, but now that it's on, you can see. So that is connected, and then there is the flasher right there. Alright, so I'm just going to plug this into there. Yeah, so we're all connected. Wire comes up there, and then that goes down to our pin header. We're at 1.8 volts. That blue light there shows that. And then you'll see here, it detected a GD25LQ128. That's the chip that's on there. And so if we go, right now I'm at 1.8, SPI, NOR flash. I have it verify programming when it's writing, which I did when I actually wrote the new firmware. And then you can see this is what it read off the chip. And if you were to flash a new BIOS, you would click this button and then pick your bin file. So one thing that you do have to do is your BIOS with these motherboards probably comes in a CAP file, C-A-P, I believe. That is a UEFI container. I don't know exactly how it all works together, but essentially your BIOS is contained within that CAP file. And you do have to extract it. You can't just download the CAP file and then flash it here by choosing this. So the way that you do that is with a program called UEFI Tool. All right, so I got UEFI Tool open here. You can just find this on the internet. I think it's on GitHub is where I got it, and there's just releases there. It doesn't need to install. It's just an exe in a zip or something along those lines. Anyway, so we open an image file, and then here you can see this is the B350F Gaming. It's version 5.220 BIOS, and here's the CAP file. So we're going to open that, and then that will, we already had one open. Normally you'll see nothing here. And then you actually just need to right click here, extract body, and then see that's the file right there. And then you don't have to change this to a bin, but I did change it to a bin like this, just so the other program, the Spy Flasher, just looks for bin files. Not that you couldn't use a ROM. But yeah, so that's your BIOS, and then you flash it using this. You can see we're still connected to the computer. I had to flash quite a few times. I tried a few different versions, and then 5220 is the one that ended up working for me. But after that, the machine booted up. I got into the BIOS, and that is how I fixed my friend's Asus B350F gaming motherboard that had a bricked BIOS without having to take any soldering iron to it or anything like that. Thanks for watching. Bye.